Good morning and welcome back to Charity Farms. Today is actually a kitchen day. Whenever you prepare food and you grow a food, or you buy in abundance and you buy bulk and you want to be able to preserve it for later, you actually must dedicate a day that I like to call kitchen day. Today we are going to make bone broth. I'm going to do a double batch of homemade gumbo and can it because my husband and I, even though you can do freezer meals and there are people who enjoy freezer meals, we are not one of them. We prefer, if we need a meal to go that's easy, fast, and convenient and already ready, we prefer homemade canned food. It's more to the flavors that we want, and we don't have to worry about the sogginess. That's the problem that we have with frozen foods. That's why we don't like them. We don't like frozen meals. There's nothing wrong with frozen meals. Everybody has their own preferences, but because for us it just doesn't taste right, we don't do frozen meals. And then I have chicken, because my husband and I, we have cooked Italian sausage already the way we want it, and that way we can just use it whenever we want to. We also have cooked taco ground beef, because we use it for other things that we could use. However, I didn't get a chance to actually cook chicken and can it the way we want that. So this is what today's going to be. It's going to be how you can actually can chicken without even having to worry about cooking it, because it's going to create its own juices. And I'm going to have 3 jars that will be for enchilada chicken, different seasonings, and the rest of the chicken that I have thought I'm actually going to just use for regular seasonings that we always put in there, which is Italian seasoning, rosemary, sage, just the typical stuff that we actually normally put into our chicken. So it's already ready to go, and we can put it in whatever we want, especially when we just had a very long, hard day, and all we want to do is just relax and not worry about dishes, not worry about cooking for each other, just relax, because that's really what we want to do. We don't want to put more stress on us, because God only created us to actually have so much stress. So today is kitchen day, so let's go get started. I buy all of my seasonings in the Tampico bag because they are friendlier to my budget, and you get more in the bag than you do in the jars at the grocery store. I have my coffee grinder to grind the firmer herbs like my homegrown rosemary and my store-bought sage. I use a small funnel to place my ground herbs into their proper container. Don't forget to clean out your grinder after each herb grind. I have washed my celery stalk and bell peppers. Now I am dicing them for the homemade gumbo. Now I am cutting both ends of the onion, cutting down the center to make it easier to peel the outer layer, then dicing them and placing them with the bell peppers and the celery. Now to a stock pot, add 1 tablespoon of olive oil over medium heat and add the diced vegetables. Now add your seasonings. Remember, this is a double batch. I'm adding 3 teaspoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of rosemary, 2 teaspoons of oregano, and 1 tablespoon of Italian seasoning. I am cooking 1 cup of all-purpose flour over low heat to cook out the raw flour. You can do this in the stock pot, but because I want more control over the cook, I did it separately. I am adding 1 cup of homemade bone broth to the cooked flour and whisking to remove any lumps. Once my roux is smooth, I add to my vegetables in the stock pot and stir my vegetables around. After 5 minutes of the vegetables cooking with the roux, add 2 16-ounce cans of tomato sauce and stir around. Each time you add ingredients to your dish, add your seasonings as well.
Gumbo has a stew-like consistency, so I'm adding 2.5 cups of water to allow the roux the liquid it needs to thicken up. Now that the gumbo is cooking on low heat, I need to get lunch ready for David and I. For my CSA order this week, I have mixed salad, an Armenian cucumber, and okra. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. I am peeling and dicing my cucumber, then adding 1 tablespoon of salt, covering and setting aside for 5 to 10 minutes. This pulls out any bitterness of the cucumber. During this time, I'm cutting my okra and will add to my gumbo with my sliced meat. I have set my gumbo aside to cook lunch. I have 2 bratwursts that we got from the butcher. I brown on all sides, then add water to create steam, cover, and allow the broth to cook all the way through to reach 165 degrees Fahrenheit or 75 degrees Celsius. Now that the salt removed the bitterness from the cucumbers, I empty the excess water and rinse the salt off of the cucumbers. I'm cutting my mixed salad to bite-sized pieces. I have pickled carrots and red onions in the fridge. I'm taking about a tablespoon each, dicing them and adding them to the salad. For my homemade vinaigrette, I place 1 tablespoon of honey in a bowl with about 2 teaspoons of the vinegar from the pickled onions that I had in my fridge. Then I add about 1 teaspoon of olive oil and mix well. I season my salad with garlic and onion powder and then mix. Lunchtime is over. I placed my gumbo back on low heat and added my diced 4 andouille sausage links, an entire package of diced kielbasa, 2 diced chicken breasts, and my diced okra. While the gumbo simmers, I'm dicing my chicken breasts that I want canned, removing any trim I do not want. The excess trim allows me a chance to give my cats and dogs a little treat for the day once I boil it. I have placed kitchen towels on my counter to keep the jars off of the cold counter. I pulled out my quart jars and rinsed them. Because these are being pressure canned, the jars do not need to be sterilized. I have 4 jars that I filled with the raw cut chicken, leaving 1 inch of headspace from the top. I season the first 2 jars with paprika, ground rosemary, and ground Italian seasoning. Then I use a butter knife and stir the ingredients while removing any possible air pockets. I wipe the rim with distilled vinegar while I am also checking for cracks. Then I place a lid and a rim on the jar, finger tight. I perform the same process for the other 2 jars of chicken, but I add enchilada sauce, again leaving 1 inch of headspace. For my cooked pork, I am placing in the jar, leaving 1 inch of headspace. Because this is cooked meat, it will not be able to pull enough of its own juices out like the raw chicken will, so I will add water or broth, covering the meat and leaving 1 inch of headspace. I use a butter knife to remove any possible air bubbles and add more water and or broth as needed. I wipe the rim with distilled vinegar while also checking for cracks. Then I place a lid and rim on, finger tight. I repeat the process for my gumbo. Because this has a stew-like consistency, I do not need to add water or broth. I use a butter knife to remove any possible air bubbles and ensure it is 1 inch of headspace. I wipe the rim with distilled vinegar while also checking for cracks. Then I place a lid and rim finger tight.
So this is my Presto canner, pressure canner. It's a birthday present that my husband got me. It stacks what I need, everything that I have 2 things. I have 2 of these trays so I can actually stack on top, and that's why I'm using this, so I can actually do stacking. So I have a couple things that we need to look at when we do pressure canning. Make sure you have your weights. Okay, now depending on where you're at in your location, depends on the amount of pressure that you're going to need when you actually pressure can. We are below sea level, so we need at least, we need at least 1,000 PSI. When you see this gauge, you can get a little closer, you'll see that there's a 10. I usually try to stick to 11. A lot of times people will say 15 pounds of pressure because that will actually allow even higher climates. Now, there will be a gauge whenever you actually purchase your pressure canner to tell you what you need for your climate that you're looking at. But you can also do a search engine and let you know. I can actually link down, I believe it's the USDA that will tell you what you need for your area, for how much pressure you actually need, and you'll need the proper weight for that. And it will also tell you the times for what you're cooking. Typically, when you're in higher climates, you would add so much more time. For meats, for my climate in Buckeye, which is we are at sea level, it's 90 minutes. But maybe somebody who is maybe in Idaho or, I don't know, Mount Everest, they might have to add 20 more minutes to that along with the weight that they use for it. So it always depends on the sea level that you're at, how high above sea level you are. The higher above sea level you are, the higher your pressure, the longer the time. That's the best way I can put it to you. Now for this Presto, the other thing that you want to do is you want to fill your line, do this with water, just enough so that it will keep pressure, so steam, in order to keep the pressure for your jars. This is not a water bath, so I'm not filling this up to water or make sure their water's over my jars. I'm just making sure that there's going to be enough water to ensure that there's going to be enough steam to go for 90 minutes, probably even more than that, because once I hit 90 minutes, I have to let it cool down. You're going to have your gauge. This is something else you're going to look at. This is, not all of them have gauges. They base it off of their weight, and that's fine because it rattles. But for this one, it has a gauge. The other thing it has is this is the pressure. So I want to make sure I'm pulling it and making sure there's nothing in between to cause any obstructions. I want to make sure my gasket is good to go and clean, and there's no, kind of cleaning that. There's no cracks that are old and it needs to be replaced. Gaskets have a lifespan, so you got to keep on top of that, and don't, it's always good to always have gaskets on hand when you actually get it, just to kind of like get ready to order the next gasket, because those are usually the easy ones that need to be replaced. Gaskets can cost, they're the cheap ones, the cheaper ones to actually replace it. I think the most expensive would probably be, we got one for the Instant Pot, we got a set of 3 and it cost like $7, so it's not that hard. The other thing you're gonna do is, this is the vent. This is where my weight's gonna go on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look through this vent, through here and through here. I wanna make sure there's no obstructions. And if you see an obstruction, get a toothpick or blow. Make sure that you can see through it. So you're gonna see me do a quick little, I can see through that. Is it blurry? Can I see things? And I can, very clearly. And I'm doing the other side, and I can see that clearly. Okay. Now, right here, this is how we're going to try to walk through this on what I have. Right here is where we have this arrow that tells me where my can litter, my lid should actually go. On this lid right here, you see the arrow. These two must match up. So, what I'm doing is, as you can see, that arrow is matching this arrow. And then you have the arrow that tells you to close and the arrow that tells you to open. We're going to close it. And that is the pressure that you get for that. All right. Now, this is the All-American canner. It is the same concept with the dial gauge and the vent. It does not have the pressure lock on this because the vent is the pressure. Once I put the weight on this, the pressure will build up onto this. The other thing is, the All-American canner is much smaller and it locks differently, but it comes with a weight where it's not a set weight size. You can determine the weight that you want. You have a 10, a 5, and a 15. I'm gonna put it on the 10. That's usually what we're at. We're actually, my husband did correct me, we are 800
feet above sea level.
800 feet above sea level, but we're still below 1,000, and that's why, that's what it is sea level is anything 1,000 and below, but we are at 800 above sea level, so we're considered on pressure canning around the sea level area. So what we're gonna do now is just do the same thing, add this with water. The American canner doesn't have gaskets at all because it uses these rings to tie it down, which I'll walk you through to show you how I do it. Where the Presto had a gasket because I twisted it. That gasket's what's keeping the pressure. For the American canner, it's these screws on how I actually screw this that's going to keep the pressure. So, just like the Presto, there is also an arrow on the All-American canner. It's to let you know where the lid is going to match up for that arrow. For the lid, the arrow is right there. So you see how these two match up. That's really what that is. You want to make sure they match up because if you actually look, what's happening is you're getting ready to do a lock. That's what that's all about. That's why it's there. You're going to lock it. And then you're going to squeeze it. That's what that arrow is for, because you're going to lock it there. Now, what we're going to do is these, we're going to pull over and we're going to tighten. Now, usually I do 2 at a time. And I do both sides, this side and the opposite side at the same time. So, and I'm gonna finish up the other 4 by doing the same thing simultaneously. So what we're gonna do right now is we're going to turn on our stove and we're going to let this cook. And when we finally get steam coming out of this vent steadily and this vent steadily, we will start the timer for 10 minutes. Once the timer goes out for 10 minutes, we will put the weight on and the weight on. From there, these gauges will start to build pressure. When they build pressure, the All-American canner, once they build up to 10, they'll build up pressure. So once they get up to 11 pounds of pressure is what we want, at least 10, but I prefer 11. Then I start my timer for 90 minutes. Now, if I was cooking beans or green beans that don't require 90 minutes, but I had meat in here that does require 90 minutes, I must always go with the one that requires the most time because you want to make sure that there's going to be no issues with your meat or the one that requires the most time. Not everything is 90 minutes, but meat is. The reason why we're using the pressure canner is because, and not a water bath, is because water bath is you're able to do a water bath when you have food that is more acidic. Botulism doesn't like acidity. That's why you're able to use a water bath canner, and it doesn't need such high heat and high pressure in order to actually kill any microorganisms that could cause problems. You do lose some nutrients when you actually can your food, but at least you have food that you know what's in there. You cooked it, you canned it. You don't have to worry about any preservatives. There's no preservatives in here. This is all you and your recipe, your desire. You know what it is, and you can just throw it together relatively easy. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and turn on the stove, probably about medium heat because we gotta allow it to come to a steam, and low heat will not let it steam. So I'll probably do medium high heat for both. So as you can see, these are both steaming relatively long, so relatively steady, not long, just steadily. So we're gonna set our timer for 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, we'll come back and we'll put on the weights. Okay, the timer has gone off, so I'm about to put the weight on the Presto. And I'm going to wait for it to build up pressure. And I'm going to put the weight at 10 pounds for the All-American. I'm going to wait for that to build up pressure. Once it builds up pressure to where I need it, once it hits 1,000 PSI, I'm going to start the timer for 90 minutes. Once that actually happens, then I will start the timer for 90 minutes, and it must stay at 1,000 or higher, no lower than 1,000. If it goes below 1,000, I have to wait until it builds up pressure again to 1,000, and then start the timer again at 90 minutes. So you always want to make sure that's the pressure where it's at. All right, so we had hit 10 PSI, not 1,000. That's my husband made it very clear. 1,000 pounds per square inch is quite powerful, so really it's 10. The All-American hit the 10 in about, I don't know, probably about 15 minutes earlier, but I didn't put the timer on until about 4 minutes ago. And the Presto just now is between the 10 and the 11. I try to make it mainly towards the 11 before I put that timer. Okay. It is now 11:30. We started this at 6:30. We finally turned everything off. Everything came down to pressure, and now I'm about to lift up the lid and then also, or take off the weight, then lift up the lid very carefully because there's still steam in there. It's still very hot. So, and then I'll remove the jars. Wheat. These are jar grabbers. Don't know exactly what they're called, but I'll put on the screen below. But this is what you use to actually grab your jars when they're hot. And you place on a towel on your counter because you don't want your hot jar to touch a cold counter. So, this is the chicken that we cooked. Remember, it was raw. And we didn't put any fluids in there. Look at all that juice that came out of that. All we put in there was seasonings. And now for the All-American canner. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm just taking off all the rings. And the reason why you want to take off the rings and not keep them on is because if the lid did not have a good seal, and we thought it did, and it opens up due to pressure in the air or just it not having a good seal, if you have a ring on it, or if you stack it like on top of each other like this, it could open up and then it could reseal with the pressure. But by doing that, air could have already gotten in and contaminated your food, and then botulism can form. So you never want to stack your jars on top of each other. Preferably you actually have a shelf that actually can keep it from not doing it, but if you're going to stack, you want to have them like that. That way, if it opens, this will not seal back in. You'll know it's actually open, and that will actually help you know if there's a seal. Now, every time you're about to open this anyways, always check the seal, always.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my kitchen day, and I hope you learned something. Until next time, you have a blessed day. Bye.